Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour. COP28 summit ends with a deal which for the first time pushes nations to transition away from fossil fuels to avert the worst effects of climate change. India remembers the 2001 terror attack on country's parliament. Prime Minister Narendra Modi leads nation in paying tributes to martyrs. Poland's new Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government sworn in. Tusk expected to travel to Brussels for an EU summit on Thursday. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attends the inauguration of the Chief Ministers of Indian states of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. And skill and thrill on full display at a sporting event for persons with disabilities being held in India's capital, New Delhi. COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber of the UAE describes a climate deal approved by almost 200 countries on Wednesday as a quote-unquote historic package of measures. The next report tells you more.
After 2 weeks of hard-fought negotiations, the COP28 Climate Summit approved a deal that would, for the first time, push nations to transition away from fossil fuels to avert the worst effects of climate change on Wednesday. Representatives from nearly 200 countries agreed to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels to avert the worst impacts of climate change at the summit.
Through the nights and the early hours of the morning, we worked collectively for consensus. The presidency listened, engaged, and guided. I promised I would roll up my sleeves, and I promised I would be with you every step of the way.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber called the deal historic.
It is so decided. Enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus. An agreement is only as good as its implementation. We are what we do, not what we say. We must take the steps necessary to turn this agreement into tangible actions.
5 key measures that have been outlined to combat climate change in the deal. They are a just transition away from fossil fuels by 2050, prioritizing zero and low emission technologies like renewables and nuclear, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, accelerating the phase down of coal power, and rapidly deploying clean transportation solutions. Saudi Arabia welcomed the deal, but repeated the oil producers' stance that tackling climate change was about reducing emission using all technologies.
On behalf of the Arab group, I also extend to you thanks and appreciation for your efforts, along with all party states, towards the success of the results of the first global stocktake and the success of its outcomes, which confirm the multiple paths and approaches that achieve the goal of limiting the temperature 1.5 degrees in line with the circumstances and priorities of each country in order to achieve the goals of sustainable development.
These measures aim to align with the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement and urgently address the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels and coal to mitigate climate change. These actions aim to significantly reduce emissions across energy systems and transportation, paving the way for a sustainable future. The proposal underscores the critical role of multilateralism and international cooperation in addressing global challenges particularly in the context of the Paris Agreement's implementation. Anil Thomas's report for DD India.
And my colleague Vinod Kumar joins us from Dubai. Vinod, how are the words transitioning away different from a phase out of fossil fuels? Did it all come down to semantics at the end?
Ramachandran, yes, semantics do play a definite role here. In the first draft, the mention was on reduction and consumption of fossil fuels. If the world expected that there will be a phase down, but in the final draft and approved document, it says transitioning. Now, if you want to explain the semantics of this, we need to know first why in the first place that we are using fossil fuels. Fossil fuels were being used historically because of its abundance, cheap price, and most importantly, in the current time, it is the energy calorific density. Even the renewable sources, the batteries, the hydrogen does not have the enough calorific density that a fossil fuel has. That's the main challenge in transitioning to a renewable energy source for the future. So if you say phase out, you just remove fossil fuels from the entire planet. Then what is going to replace it? So that is where the word transition is very important. Transitioning means slowly transitioning from the current fossil fuels to a more equitable, more dependable, and more accessible forms of renewable energy. That is the word transition means here. And COP28 presidency not only have mentioned this transition thing, there are a slew of other things. You have to see the complete document to get the complete package. There is emphasis on the national determined contributions. There is also emphasis on tripling the renewable energies and doubling energy efficiency. That's how this word transition comes, doubling the energy efficiency of the existing systems, tripling renewables, and COP28 presidency's action agenda. Action agenda is a four-pronged mechanism: fast-tracking just energy transition, fixing the climate finance, and focusing on people culture. This COP had an indigenous people day, a day dedicated for the youth. So this is an all-inclusive process that had happened here. And of course, the last one among these four is fostering inclusivity in climate action. This is the area where India has given its complete focus: inclusivity, common but differentiated responsibilities, and climate justice and climate equity. This is where the semantics transitions itself into the concrete plans that the COP28 presidency as well as the COP UNFCCC has tasked with.
Right, Vinod, now that we've got semantics out of the way, how would you sum up India's interventions at COP28? Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the opening plenary. He took part in two side events that India co-chaired with the UAE and Sweden. Do you think there's enough in the text of the agreement that should make New Delhi satisfied, if not happy?
I would say that New Delhi is really happy. This COP28 or any COP for that matter is a consensus-based mechanism. All the 198 countries has to come into a consensus so that we can go about the future. So India, of course, is definitely a party. In fact, India is one among the big three. India, United States, and China are the major stakeholders in this climate action. And India's presence there was really emphatic. India achieved the reduction in the emission intensity and surpassing the 2030 targets ahead of the schedule. This was clearly given in our national statement, and our climate action was further demonstrated by achieving 40% of electric installed capacity through non-fossil fuel sources. And India's international endeavors like the Global Biofuel Alliance, the Solar Alliance, Mission Life, CDRI, these are the things that gave India its own place in the COP28. On top of that, our Prime Minister had launched a program called the Green Credit Initiative along with the various stakeholders, and we also had India, Sweden lead IT industry transition in heavy industries like steel, aluminium, the lead IT event, and the Environment Ministry has also launched its own events called the Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment, and the Green Rising Initiative along with the UNICEF. So India's total action here at COP was jam-packed, and India really focused on climate equity, climate justice, and emphasis on CBDR principles. And more than that, the Green Credit Initiative, this is a pragmatic and philosophical shift that our country has launched. the alternative that exists right now is carbon credit mechanism, but carbon credit mechanism have completely gone in a commercial way, and there is no way, not a very tangible way to track it whether this is having a real impact. So that's why our country, with its concept of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, came with this green credit initiative focused on 8 different sectors like water conservation, mangrove conservation, and energy efficiency in agriculture. 8 heads. These are being floated by our Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and we will be having a green credit portal also, so that the world can learn from us. This is India's contribution in COP28.
All right. Thank you for that elaborate intervention there. My colleague Vinod Kumar reporting there from Dubai in the UAE. Thank you for now. Appreciate it. Right, now let me get you some more news on DD India News Hour. A security breach briefly disrupted proceedings in India's parliament after a man jumped from an overhead visitors gallery into the lower house of the legislature and set off a smoke canister. The disruption took place on the anniversary of the 2001 attack on the country's parliament.
December 13 marks the 22nd anniversary of India's parliament attack. And just as the parliamentarians were paying their tributes to the martyrs, another security breach was witnessed in India's lower house. The proceeding of Lok Sabha was halted briefly on Wednesday after 2 men entered, setting off a smoke canister inside the legislature. This man, wearing a black jacket, jumped from the visitors' gallery into the chamber. The visuals clearly show that they entered the aisles by evading security personnel. White and yellow-colored smoke could be seen. Later, the Delhi police detained both the accused from inside and identified them. Speaker Om Birla told members that investigations had found that the smoke released by the men was ordinary smoke.
हम सबकी चिंता थी कि वह धुआं क्या था। वह अभी तक प्रारंभिक जांच में जो जांच की उसमें वह साधारण धुआं और सनसनी फैलने वाला धुआं था, इसलिए उस धुएं की कोई ऐसी चिंता का विषय नहीं। उसकी प्रारंभिक ठीक से जांच कर ली गई है।
The Speaker assured lawmakers that the incident would be investigated and a report presented to the House.
प्रारंभिक जांच के अंदर जो प्रारंभिक जांच आए वो दोनों लोग पकड़ लिए गए हैं, उनकी सारी सामग्री को जब्त कर लिया गया है और जो 2 लोग बाहर थे उनको भी गिरफ्तार कर लिया गया है।
Speaker of India's lower house also convened an all-party meeting on the security breach. It was on December 13 in 2001 that 5 terrorists entered Parliament House complex around 11:40 a.m. in an ambassador car fitted with a red light and a forged Home Ministry sticker on the car's windshield. As the car moved towards building gate number 12, one of the members of the Parliament House watch and ward staff became suspicious. He forced it to turn back, after which it hit the then Vice President's vehicle, and the terrorists got out and opened fire. By this time, an alarm was raised and all the building gates were promptly shut. A firefight ensued, lasting over 30 minutes. All 5 terrorists were killed, along with 8 security personnel and a gardener. At least 15 people were injured. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now let's revisit what transpired on the 13th of December in 2001 when terrorists attacked India's Parliament building in New Delhi, which led to heightened tensions with Pakistan. Take a look at the next report.
13th of December 2001, the day that shook Indian democracy. At around 11:40 a.m. that day, 5 terrorists entered the old Parliament House complex in an ambassador car, wielding a red light and carrying a Home Ministry sticker, later found to be fake, on the windshield. As the car moved towards building's gate number 12, one of the members of the Parliament House Watch and Ward staff became suspicious and forced the vehicle back. As it turned back, it then hit Vice President Krishan Kant's vehicle, after which the terrorists got down and opened fire. By this time, an alarm was raised and all the 5 building gates were closed. In the ensuing firing that lasted for over 30 minutes, all 5 terrorists were killed, 8 security personnel and a gardener were martyred. At least 15 people were injured. 100 MPs who were present in the parliament all escaped unhurt. Within days of the incident, the special cell of the Delhi police announced the arrest of 4 individuals, saying that they were tracked down with the help of leads relating to the car used and cell phone records. They were Mohammad Afzal Guru, a former JKLF terrorist, his cousin Shaukat Hussain Guru, Shaukat Hussein's wife Afzan Guru, and S.A.R. Gilani, a lecturer of Arabic at Delhi University. The incident led to increased tensions between India and Pakistan. It subsequently led to Operation Parakram, an 11-month-long border standoff between India and Pakistan with heightened troop deployment.
Coming now to the legislative business transacted by both houses of India's parliament today. The Central Goods and Services Tax Second Amendment Bill 2023 was introduced in India's lower house of parliament, that is the Lok Sabha. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman moved the bill, which is intended to amend the Central Goods and Services Tax Act of 2017. The minister also introduced the Provisional Collection of Taxes Bill 2023 in the Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha also took the Post Office Bill 2023 for consideration and passing. The bill seeks to repeal the Indian Post Office Act of 1898 and to amend the law relating to the post office in India. Minister of Communications, Electronics and IT Ashwini Vaishnav moved the bill. The Parliament passed the Central Universities Amendment Bill 2023 with the Upper House Rajya Sabha giving assent to it on Wednesday. The Lok Sabha had passed the bill last week. The bill will amend the Central Universities Act 2009, which establishes central universities for teaching and research in various states. The bill seeks to establish a central tribal university in the southern Indian state of Telangana. It will provide avenues for higher education and research facilities primarily for the tribal population of the country. Still to come on DD India News Hour. India votes for a UNGA resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wins leadership test over Rwanda migration plan for now. A New Delhi declaration on artificial intelligence adopted at GPAI summit, member states to work towards a global AI framework for inclusive adaptation.
What are you watching, Dad?
Don't you often say, think before investing in the stock market? So I'm trying to gain some knowledge.
From whom?
That's this stocks expert. Makes great educational videos. Gives good investment tips too.
Dad, don't rely on such videos. Do your own research or contact a SEBI-registered investment advisor. In the name of education, some influencers often misguide investors. You will have to bear the losses.
Do you know there's an investor protection fund for investors, IPF, but if your trade isn't executed on the exchange or if it's some guaranteed return scheme, then even IPF will not be able to help you.
And what if your broker becomes a defaulter? Then?
In that case, IPF can provide you with compensation.
Where did you learn this?
NSE's website.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. The United Nations General Assembly has passed a non-binding symbolic resolution to demand an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. The United States, Israel and 8 other countries voted against it and 23 abstained, but 153 countries, including India, voted in favor of an end to the conflict.
The United Nations on Tuesday demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict after more than 3/4 of the 193-member General Assembly backed the move, which had been vetoed by the United States in the Security Council last week. Member states adopted a resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, as well as ensuring humanitarian access.
I used my recent attendance at the Doha Forum and every other platform I can to encourage cooperation among states with the same singular goal in mind: to make peace for all. In the name of humanity, I ask you all once again, stop this violence now. I thank you.
The resolution also reiterated the General Assembly's demand that all parties comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, notably with regard to the protection of civilians. The resolution was adopted to a round of applause with 153 votes in favor, while 23 countries abstained from the vote. The United States does not have a veto in the General Assembly. It voted against the resolution along with Israel and 8 other countries.
Any ceasefire right now would be temporary at the best and dangerous at worst. Dangerous to Israelis, who would be subject to relentless attacks, and also dangerous to Palestinians, who deserve the chance to build a better future for themselves, free from Hamas.
Israel's ambassador to the UN, G. Erdogan, argued that the ceasefire will only favor Hamas. He also decreed what he said was a hypocritical resolution.
A ceasefire means one thing and one thing only: ensuring the survival of Hamas, ensuring the survival of genocidal terrorists committed to the annihilation of Israel and Jews. This is no secret. Hamas's charter makes this clear, and Hamas leaders have publicly stated that October 7th was just a rehearsal.
India voted in favor of the draft resolution in the UNGA's emergency session. India's permanent representative to the UN, Ruchira Kamboj, noted that there is an enormous humanitarian crisis and a large-scale loss of human lives.
Our challenge in this extraordinarily difficult time is to strike the right balance. The gravity and complexity of what the international community faces is underlined by the Secretary-General invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. We therefore welcome the fact that the international community has been able to find a common ground to address the multiple challenges facing the region right now.
Prior to the UNSC resolution, 2 amendments making specific reference to the terror group Hamas were voted down by members. The vote comes as the conflict between Israel and Hamas enters its 3rd month. Bureau Report, DD India.
Across the Atlantic, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak breathes a sigh of relief after winning a key parliamentary vote on his government's plan to send some asylum seekers on a one-way trip to Rwanda. But as the bill moves through the country's legislature, this is only the first step, and when it is put to vote in the new year, he may have to face further obstacles.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak won a vote in Parliament on Tuesday over a bill which he hopes will allow Britain to send asylum seekers who arrive illegally in Britain to Rwanda. With a majority of 44, the legislation easily cleared the first common obstacle, although more votes will be held in the upcoming year. Prior to the vote on this plan, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made every effort to persuade his party members. Thousands of United Nations officials, politicians, aid and business groups assembled in Geneva on Wednesday to seek solutions to a record displacement crisis as the United Nations Refugee Agency aims to counter Western narrative that casts refugees as a threat.
Actually, the number of refugees and displaced people, so refugees in their own countries, is 114 people. So it's 114 million today, of whom almost 40 million are refugees, so are people that have crossed the border.
On Wednesday, Rishi Sunak faced off with opposition leader Starmer in Parliament in the last Prime Minister's Questions of the Year.
He talks about children. Nearly 140,000 children are going to be homeless this Christmas. That is more than ever before. That's a shocking state of affairs, and it should shame this government.
If he really cared building homes. When there was an opportunity in this House, Mr. Speaker, in this House, to back our plans to reform defective EU laws, to unlock 100,000 new homes, Mr. Speaker, what did he do? What did he do?
Their fierce exchange, in which Starmer accused Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party of being in a meltdown, came a day after the Prime Minister emerged victorious from a bruising vote on his flagship Rwanda migration policy. Bitter divisions within Sunak's party means any respite is likely to be short-lived, as some Conservative lawmakers threaten to kill the bill, and with it, quite possibly the government, before an election expected next year.
The GPAI summit adopts the New Delhi Declaration on Artificial Intelligence, member states to work towards a global AI framework for inclusive adaptation. Take a look at the next report.
India is hosting the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence Summit 2023. On day 2, Minister of State for Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, announced the signing of the New Delhi Declaration of GPAI Summit to work towards a global framework for inclusive AI.
The Delhi Declaration deals with collaborations between like-minded countries to create applications out of AI that can help peoples of all the countries of the world, which is creating more and more applications in healthcare and agriculture, real-life cases. Second, to create a global governance framework that will make sure that AI that is available and that is deployed is always safe and trusted. And third, that AI is not exclusionary.
Echoing the sentiment, French Minister for Digital Transition stressed upon the role of AI in strengthening democracies.
We also want it to be an inclusive platform that is open to like-minded partners that share our vision of a human-centric AI and attachment to democracy.
On the sidelines of the summit, a global AI expo is organized at Bharat Mandapam. Leading AI enterprises and startups from India and the world are showcasing their innovations.
What we do is we use AI to determine the creditworthiness of small and medium businesses so that banks can get an idea of the risk to lending to the small and medium businesses also. And we are also responsible in our AI because a lot of lending happens to small and medium businesses and they are not able to repay back, right? So we are very cautious of that, and we make sure that there is no bias, whether it's regarding to race, whether it's gender.
And we work mainly on robotics, and we do wearable sensors, so we work on the wearable sensors for motion capture and risk analysis. So I think we use AI technology, so it's quite important to be here in this summit.
GPAI is an international initiative to support responsible development and use of AI.
With the New Delhi Declaration, the GPAI summit paves the way for a global framework on artificial intelligence, being mindful of its pros and cons, at the same time harnessing its limitless potential for greater public good. With camera person Sumit Dhiman, Shubhendu Ghosh in New Delhi for DD India.
And now take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Gasoline in Cuba, which is already one of the world's best bargains, is getting cheaper by the day for those who have access to dollar as the local peso currency continues its fall. The peso began a sharp decline in 2021 and has been in fall ever since. The trial has begun in Berlin for a German intelligence employee accused of selling classified information to Russia. The German authorities anticipate heightened Russian spying because of tensions over the Ukraine conflict. Germany's DAX held steady post-approval of the 2024 budget by Chancellor Scholz's coalition. European shares saw a slight rise because of interest rate dynamics before the awaited Federal Reserve decision. Imprisoned former Prime Minister Imran Khan of Pakistan entered a plea of innocence regarding allegations of divulging classified state information on Wednesday under an indictment that dealt a new blow to his chances of contesting the country's general election in February. Still to come on DD India News Hour. An expert take on what the COP28 agreement means for the global fight against climate change. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attends the inauguration of the Chief Ministers of the Indian states of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. And Kathmandu hosts a symposium on fostering digital connectivity between India and Nepal.
What are you watching, Dad?
Don't you often say, think before investing in the stock market? So I'm trying to gain some knowledge.
From whom?
That's this stocks expert. Makes great educational videos. Gives good investment tips too.
Dad, don't rely on such videos. Do your own research or contact a SEBI-registered investment advisor. In the name of education, some influencers often misguide investors. You'll have to bear the losses.
Do you know there's an investor protection fund for investors, IPF, but if your trade isn't executed on the exchange or if it's some guaranteed return scheme, then even IPF will not be able to help you.
And what if your broker becomes a defaulter? Then?
In that case, IPF can provide you with compensation.
Where did you learn this?
NSE's website.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. COP28 summit ends with a deal which, for the first time, pushes nations to move away from oil, gas and coal. India remembers the 2001 terror attack on country's parliament. Prime Minister Narendra Modi pays tributes to martyrs. And India votes for a UNGA resolution on immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and unconditional release of all hostages. Now, going back to the top story, a last-minute deal agreed to by COP28 negotiators in Dubai. Dr. Viav Chatur joins us from the UAE. Dr. Chaturvedi is a fellow at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Now, the Council on Energy, Environment and Water is an independent, non-partisan, not-for-profit policy research institution devoted to research on all matters affecting the use, reuse and misuse of resources. It's based in India's capital, New Delhi. Dr. Chaturvedi, welcome to DD India News Hour. To begin with, could you put the text of the agreement in its proper context for our viewers? What does the agreement mean for the fight against climate change? And can it meet the target of keeping the Earth's temperature to below 1.5 degrees Celsius?
Great. Very good evening. Thank you for having me on the show. Well, I think there are many different elements to the text. In negotiations, there are many parallel tracks on which negotiations happen. But the big message coming out is, first of all, for the first time in history, fossil fuels have been included in the text. Till now, it was only coal that was being targeted. The first time, all fossil fuels will be targeted. So that's the first thing. The second thing is always about that what is the intensity with which fossil fuels have been targeted. Right? So what's the intensity? The intensity is, you could say, kind of a bit of a letdown. So the expectation was the demand was that fossil fuel should be phased out. That should be the agreement. Right now, the language only says that we should transition away from fossil fuels. So there is no phase out, there is no phase down. So you should just transition away. And the language around coal is much more tougher. That only means, well, that is acknowledged that fossil fuels are important, and it gives us some kind of breather for oil-producing nations. At the same time, the writing on the wall is very clear for all of them. It has been acknowledged fossil fuels is critical. Science was kind of reiterated many times during the whole discussion. So the importance of science, that all fossil fuels should be covered, we have achieved that. So it's great. But in the next few COP, we do expect this kind of screws to be tightened around the fossil fuel. And that writing on the wall is also very clear. So this is kind of the big message.
Right.
Another big message about the loss and damage fund. This was a very long-standing demand of the developing South. That fund also got operationalized. It was already accepted last year in the Sharm el Sheikh agreement. Now some more like the operational or institutional arrangement around the fund has also been finalized. So that is also a kind of very positive development. These two are kind of big takeaways. The third is the global goal on adaptation. There is also a framework that has been kind of agreed upon. So these are some key takeaways, from this particular COP. And there are many announcements, especially India's announcement of green credits. That's kind of a very big announcement. If the world kind of, is able to harness the potential of green credits, it will be very, very beneficial on many different ways. So those are the things that I would say come to my mind in terms of the positives of what this COP has managed to achieve.
Right. Dr. Chaturvedi, you refer to the loss and damage fund, and that gives me a perfect segue to my next question to you. How does the COP28 actually propose to push nations to move away from oil, gas and coal? What does the deal say, for instance, about issues such as climate financing, loss and damage fund, green technologies? Because these are important issues for developing countries such as India.
Yeah, so finance is an extremely important issue because for the developing South, which wants to be ambitious, it's already being ambitious given its fiscal space, but if it wants to be more ambitious, then finance is the biggest lever, and that has always been lacking. And on finance front, I think there are a lot of announcements being made, right? So like you would hear 700 million for loss and damage fund and many of those kinds of things, which is great, which is a great start. That's how I'll put it.
Okay.
The language around finance is 4 words are used. The 4 words are very interesting. So it says new, additional, predictable, and replenishable finance. That's what we need. That's what, and that was not really agreed upon. The commitment that you kind of hear are all voluntary in nature. So they're great. But as I said, we need something that is very predictable. It is new, it is additional, and it is replenishable. We are still a bit far from that. So on the financial front, the demand of the developing South was kind of not really met, even though many voluntary commitments, which are voluntary means one time, So that's the challenge with voluntary. These are one-time commitments, which is great. It's a great welcome step. But we need to have something like a commitment that will be honored year after year, and within the UN process. That did not happen at this COP, but let's hope for the best that hopefully it should happen in the next COP.
Fair enough. And talking about the global South, Dr. Chaturvedi, the small island states in particular are reported to have some reservations on the outcomes. For instance, the Alliance of Small Island States says the text has, quote unquote, a litany of loopholes. Now, what are their concerns, and do you think those concerns are legitimate?
Yes. So the situation of the small island states, we should recognize it. These islands are expected to disappear if sea level rises. So it's an existential crisis for them. And of course, no wonder, just imagine, your home is being submerged and you see this happening every day. And you know that in 30, 40, 50 years from now, effectively it will disappear. There will be no land there. That's the sea level rise that is already being witnessed by these states. So they are kind of very, very emotional about this issue, and very understandably so. Right? Very emotional, it's an existential crisis. So their demand was very clear. Their demand was that there should be a very strong language around fossil fuels. Their demand was that fossil fuels should be phased out, first of all, and their use should be peaked in this decade. Right, so peaking of fossil fuel energy in this decade with phase out by 2050, something like that. So they demanded a much more stronger language. What has kind of been agreed upon in the COP, as I said, that fossil fuels have been mentioned, but the language is very weak around it, right? So that, of course, that means the small island states are not at all very happy about this language. And the intervention after the text was adopted, the intervention by the small island state representative was exactly what you have talked about. They very clearly said there are many, many loopholes. They're very unhappy. The text makes it a notch more difficult for the world to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is extremely important because beyond that is when this whole existential threat starts emerging in a very big way for them. So yes, so that's what their response was. They were not very happy. And yeah, I would kind of agree with what they said. As I said initially, the fossil fuels mentioned is a great welcome step, but there is nothing to be celebrated about. It's a welcome step. But the celebration would have happened if the language would have been a lot more stronger around this whole fossil fuel, debate. Yeah.
Let's now talk a bit, if you will, about India. Do you think India has reasons to be satisfied with the COP28 outcomes?
Yes, I think India defended its red lines very well. So one big demand from the developed world was that coal power, there should be no new coal power installations. Now, of course, we are a rapidly developing economy, and development concerns are paramount. And that is always the challenge with the developing economy with a limited fiscal space. And that was a big demand from the developing world. It also came in one of the interim texts, but India was able to kind of defend that very well, so which is not there now anymore. So which is great. So that is a good thing basically, but always, there's always give and take in any of the negotiation process. So this is a thing that we gained very clearly.
Right.
We were able to defend. The other part, as I said, was finance. Finance was a very big demand for India. India has been positioning itself, rightly so, as a leader of the developing South, right? And the demand, a very big demand of the developing world has been about finance. On finance, we didn't really get a lot. The developing world did not really get a lot. Also to emphasize, this was the first global stocktake COP. And that's very important. Under the Paris Agreement, procedurally, the global stocktake is an official process that looks at, that kind of collectively assesses the progress of the world on three different aspects. The first is mitigation, second is adaptation, the third is means of implementation. That includes finance. So three things where we have to take stock, whether we are progressing well or not. And then the whole point of taking stock is not just like a report. The point of stock taking exercise is how can we deliver more? How can we ratchet up our ambition? So that's the whole point of this whole stock take process, which simply means the ambition on both like fossil, the ambition on finance, that should have been a lot more. That kind of didn't end up happening on the financial part. We required a lot more.
Right.
Progress have been made, no doubt about it. But the kind of that whole ambition part of the whole deal, that has not materialized at this global stocktake COP.
All right, on that note, may I thank you, Dr. Viav Chatur for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Right, moving on, the 47th International Kolkata Book Fair has announced the United Kingdom as its theme country for 2024 in collaboration with the British Council and the Publishers and Booksellers Guild. Commemorating the 75th anniversary of the British Council in India, the UK Pavilion at the Central Park Mela ground will immerse visitors in the diverse tapestry of British education, science and cultural heritage. A Future of English exhibition promises an engaging exploration of the global impact of the language, making this literary celebration a must-attend for cultural exchange and intellectual discussion.
The UK is delighted to be the theme country for the fourth time at the Calcutta Book Fair. We thank the Publishers Guild for supporting the UK so that we can bring the best of the UK to India. Calcutta is an amazing city. I'm very lucky to have visited many times over my time here in India, and we're really looking forward to celebrating literature, arts and education through the Calcutta Book Fair and bringing some of the best names in the UK literature.
Poland's president on Wednesday swore in Donald Tusk as the country's new prime minister, marking the end of right-wing populist rule. Tusk, who already served as premier in the past, has set a pro-European Union vision for Poland and pledged strong support for Ukraine. He is also expected to travel to Brussels on Thursday to participate in the bloc summit with fellow EU leaders. In the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh, Vishnu Dev Sai took oath as the chief minister of the state today. Governor Biswa Bhushan Harichandan administered the oath of office and secrecy to him in a ceremony held at the Science College ground in Raipur. BJP leaders Arun Sao and Vijay Sharma took the oath as deputy chief ministers of the state. The oath-taking ceremony of Chhattisgarh's newly appointed chief minister took place in the presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah and BJP National President JP Nadda. In the neighbouring state of Madhya Pradesh, senior BJP leader Mohan Yadav was sworn in as Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh in Bhopal today. Governor Mangu Bhai Patel administered the oath of office and secrecy to Mr. Yadav, along with Deputy Chief Ministers designate Rajendra Shukla and Jagdish Devra at the Motilal Nehru Stadium in the capital. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah, BJP President JP Nadda, The chief ministers of BJP-ruled states and others attended the oath-taking ceremony. Bhutan officially left the least developed countries category established by the UN General Assembly in 1971. The landlocked Himalayan nation is the 7th economy to change status or graduate, following Botswana in 1994, Cape Verde in 2007, Maldives in 2011, Samoa in 2014, Equatorial Guinea in 2017, and Vanuatu in the year 2020. This brings the number of LDCs down to 45. To qualify for graduation, a country must meet a criteria on income, human assets, and economic and environment vulnerability. Since the 1980s, Bhutan has sustained an average annual real GDP growth of 7.5%, while life expectancy increased from 47 to 68 years, with primary healthcare covering 95% of the population. Still, it's among the world's only 3 carbon-negative nations, absorbing more greenhouse gases than it emits. A symposium held in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, delved into the realm of digital public infrastructure, placing a particular emphasis on fostering digital connectivity between India and Nepal. The discourse encompassed subjects such as India's G20 framework, the developmental implications of digital technology, and collaborative efforts between officials from both countries. And still to come on DD India News Hour. India's parachuters proved their mettle at the first edition of a national sporting event for persons with disabilities. An exclusive conversation with India's Minister of State for Youth Affairs and Sports, Nishit Pramanik. And Manchester United loses to Bayern Munich, gets knocked out of the Champions League.
What are you watching, Dad?
Don't you often say, think before investing in the stock market? So I'm trying to gain some knowledge.
From whom?
That's this stocks expert. Makes great educational videos, gives good investment tips too.
Dad, don't rely on such videos. Do your own research or contact a SEBI-registered investment advisor. In the name of education, some influencers often misguide investors. You will have to bear the losses.
So much good, invest it good.
Do you know there's an investor protection fund for investors, IPF, but if your trade isn't executed on the exchange or if it's some guaranteed return scheme, then even IPF will not be able to help you.
And what if your broker becomes a defaulter? Then?
In that case, IPF can provide you with compensation.
Where did you learn this?
NSE's website.
So much good, invest it good.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. On the sidelines of an international investment conference in India's capital, New Delhi, DD India's Jessica Taneja caught up with Withrinda Kapoor, the CEO and founder of Third Eye Tech, which specializes in designing advanced chips that power camera systems. Earlier this year, she was invited to the White House during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US as part of a delegation of Indian entrepreneurs, accompanying the likes of Indian billionaires Anand Mahindra and Mukesh Ambani.
We have with us Withrinda Kapoor. She's the CEO of Third Eye Tech, India's premier imaging sensor, fabless company, one of a kind, makes advanced chips in collaboration with not just the Indian military, but also the US Air Force and many others that we'll begin talking to her about. Thanks, Withrinda, for speaking to us. How important has the semiconductor industry become in India? You mentioned briefly that instead of focusing only on semiconductor manufacturing, we need to be looking at intellectual property and also more patents. And with that, your company already has 12 patents. What more are you planning to do, and how are you planning to innovate further?
It is an intellectually rich space, because if you look at all of the semiconductor giants, other than the manufacturing side, NVIDIA has a $1 trillion market cap today, right? They're not manufacturing anything. ARM in the UK just went through, I think, more than a $50 billion IPO. They don't manufacture a thing. So the question really for us is, where are we generating value? Where are we creating value?
India is also in this partnership of, initiative of critical emerging technologies with the US. We're doing a lot of work. Where do you think we need to, what do we need to do when it comes to motivating more engineers? You did talk about having the right kind of storytelling just a while ago. What more do you think needs to be done?
I think storytelling is everything, right? So if you look at the last decade before 2019, there was this constant conversation about how software is eating the world. So I call software bits, and I call hardware and semiconductor atoms. But actually your bits are powered by atoms. Everyone forgot that, right? So all of the billion-dollar valuations were coming out of software companies, and I understand why, right? They're easy to set up, they're easy to scale. But what about when Moore's law hits and when compute is no longer possible, it's no longer available? What are we going to do then? Right? So we need equal amount of evangelization of the hardware sector.
Apart from that as well, where do you think India is going to be, especially when it comes to becoming one of the reliable partners, and while the rest of the world is looking at diversification of the supply chains from China and Taiwan, given the geopolitical threat along the Taiwan Strait that gets more and more important each year? How do you think India is going to become a key player in the semiconductor, and where do you think the hurdles still lie? Just very briefly.
So I think that there are two paths, right? India is still figuring out from a policy perspective where what kind of manufacturing they want to have onshore. But I think what's more important than owning the manufacturing is having access to the manufacturing, because you can't own the manufacturing for everything. So we need to create relationships across the board with our allies, and it's something I was talking about, to make sure that at no stage are we denied any technology or any capability, and we can continue to innovate on the streams that are important to us.
And now to all the news from the world of sport. India's para shooters celebrate as the Kalo India Para Games 2023, a sporting event for persons with disabilities, embraces inclusive games at the Karni Singh shooting range in India's capital, New Delhi. Coaches and athletes anticipate a boost for para sport in India. The event underscores India's commitment to inclusivity and equal opportunities in sport.
India's parachuters find themselves at the forefront of the nation's sporting landscape with the inclusion of para games in the Kalo India series. The initiative by the government signals a promising era for para athletes in India. Coaches and para athletes are alike jubilant about the groundbreaking development. They are viewing it as a catalyst for greater recognition and support for their endeavors.
All the credit goes to our Prime Minister because of the lay down to the ground. And especially for the para athlete, it is amazing performance. And the Kalo India itself, it says the benchmark set by all the athlete, not even the regular athlete and the para athlete also. They are also performing in the Olympic level. Recently, they also won nine quota till so far for the Paris.
Kalo India is a new platform to learn new things, and the more exposure we will get, the more good we can do and win medals for India.
As the Para Kalo India series gains traction, get ready to witness incredible performances and celebrate the determination of our para athletes. It's a celebration of breaking down barriers and proving that possibilities are endless when everyone gets a chance.
Kalo India is all about finding new athletes and grooming the talented athletes. Now, with the introduction of the Para Games in the Kalo India, it has become more inclusive, and it sends a strong message that everyone is important, and also without their ability. Right now, with the same schemes and the same facilities for all, they are encouraged and they are on cloud 9. And in the coming events also, we will see a stupendous performance by our para athletes. With camera person Gaurav, Narayan Singh, DD India, Delhi.
In football, Manchester United were knocked out of the Champions League following a dispirited 1-0 defeat to Bayern Munich on Tuesday. United's slim chance of a Champions League last 16 spot ended by group winners Bayern piling more misery on Erik ten Hag's beleaguered team in an already rocky season.
Manchester United were knocked out of the Champions League following a dispirited 1-0 defeat to Bayern Munich on Tuesday. United's slim chance of a Champions League last 16 spot ended by group winners Bayern piling more misery on Erik ten Hag's beleaguered team in an already rocky season. A goalless first half saw tensions rise at Old Trafford before Kingsley Coman lashed onto Harry Kane's smart assist to finish past Andre Onana and seal victory for the German Giants. The three-time European champions needed to beat Bayern in their group stage finale and hope Copenhagen's game against visiting Galatasaray ended in a draw. Neither happened as Bayern remained unbeaten in Group A to finish with 16 points. A win over the Bundesliga champions and victory in the other game for either side at least would have seen the Red Devils drop into the Europa League. But defeat ensured that United finished bottom of the group and will not play European football for the remainder of the season. Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag, asked to speak on being dumped out, said that they are disappointed as a group and could have done better.
There's still many things to play for, and now we can focus, of course, on the Premier League. And yeah, this is, I think, the level we want to play, Champions League. So yeah, we have to give every effort in and to be in the top 4. So we next year we are back in the Champions League, and then of course we have the FA Cup. So there's still many things to play for.
United finished with just 1 win and 4 points from their 6 games. Copenhagen won 1-0 in Denmark to finish with 8 points and reach the Champions League knockout round, while Galatasaray took the Europa League playoff spot in 3rd with 5 points.
Now, skill, will and thrill were on full display on day 4 of a sporting event for persons with disabilities being held in India's capital, New Delhi. Athletes cranked up their game to corner glory. DD India's Abhishek Mahajan has more.
Kalo India Para Games, the inaugural edition, is not only catching the attention of many, but igniting euphoria across India. There are signboards to inform and attract the Delhiites, mascot Ujjwala to welcome, and huge participation of athletes who are not only enthusiastic, but showing why Kalo India Para Games is already a huge success.
देखिए, पहली बात तो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी को मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि खेलो इंडिया का माध्यम से जो स्पोर्ट्स का चाहे वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हो, चाहे खेल क्षेत्र में खिलाड़ियों को एकदम जो है प्रांतिक क्षेत्र से ढूंढ के लाने का कार्य हो, ये माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी का ये भावना, ये चिंतन के साथ ही संभव हो रहा है।
यहाँ पर जो इवेंट हमारे चल रहे हैं, हमारे 19 कैटेगरी चल रही हैं यहाँ पर, और 19 कैटेगरी जितनी भी ऑल ओवर स्टेट से हमारे जो है 30 स्टेट्स पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं, जिसमें 103 पैरा एथलीट्स पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं। अब जब ये लोग दूरदर्शन पे देख रहे हैं आपके किस तरीके से गेम चल रहे हैं, हमारे पास खूब कॉल्स आ रही हैं कि हमें भी पार्टिसिपेट करना है, हमें भी पार्टिसिपेट करना है। तो अब एक इस तरीके का देश में माहौल बन रहा है कि हमारे खिलाड़ी काफ़ी आगे आने वाले हैं।
For any nation to become a sporting nation, work at the grassroots level is important. Athletes competing here are in awe of the facilities provided.
Professionally conducted, and international officials is here, so food is very nice, and especially I am talking about volunteers. They are normal people, but they are helped a lot.
Achieving excellence in sports necessitates not only substantial socio-economic progress, but also a large talent pool that has access to high-quality sports infrastructure and resources. India, boosted by significant socio-economic growth and well-designed policy initiatives, has successfully cultivated both of these crucial elements. The Kalo India Para Games, promising to be a spectacle of inclusivity, resilience and athletic excellence. With 1,400 participants competing and able support of the government, Kalo India Para Games 2023 is already a huge success. But while we celebrate the success, it's important to remember that this process has to go on. With cameraman Saurabh Bakshi, this is Abhishek Mahajan in Delhi for DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website, ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD